welcome to Get Fruitful Conversations. I'm your host, Anwen Cooper, and if you're interested in growing a passion-fueled, purpose-driven enterprise and believe that business can be a force for greater good, then this is the podcast for you. Each episode, I'll be talking with inspiring entrepreneurs and inviting them to share how they're pioneering new ways of working to create more prosperity and positive impact for people and the planet. We'll be bringing you fresh insight and practical actions to generate more income and impact through your own business. Our purpose is to give you new perspectives on how to align your vision to a bigger mission in a way that fulfills your personal potential while also generating a longer lasting legacy and more value for all. So thanks for tuning in. I'm delighted you're here to listen. Now let's get fruitful with today's conversation. My guest today is founder and principal partner of the Elevate Partnership, Paul Crick. Having gained a degree in management sciences, an MBA from Henley Business School, as well as diplomas and certifications in marketing and psychotherapy, Paul has become a highly qualified and experienced business professional and coach. And he's worked in a range of different organisations and roles before going on to set up his current business, the Elevate Partnership, which offers high-performance coaching for teams and individuals seeking to transform their leadership culture. And he's working towards enabling more people to become better ancestors to future generations. He's also a TEDx speaker, volunteer mentor, and chair of the Board of Trustees for Performing Arts College, and holds a certificate in Business Sustainability Management from the University of Cambridge, and has also done the Climate Reality Leadership Training Programme. So a really interesting guest today. Please welcome Paul Crick.
Thank you very much. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to spend some time with you.
It's great to have you here to speak. So obviously from that introduction, people will get a feel for huge wealth of experience and knowledge that you bring to your work and the passion that you have for making business a force for good. And that's obviously the theme of these conversations. So I wanted to start off with that topic today and just ask you a bit about what does business as a force for good mean for you?
I think first of all, it's shifting away from the idea of serving short-term shareholder interests solely. I'm not saying don't serve shareholders. I'm saying be more balanced. So there's a triple bottom line is the first thing. I think business has a responsibility and is shifting that to become a force for good. So if you look at the Edelman Trust barometer for 2021, everything that's happened in the last 18 months has sort of led to a rapid decline in trust in public institutions, in political organizations, and sort of business comes out at the best of those bunches, but doesn't come out particularly well. But now has an opportunity to step into the fray, because I get the sense that, and I think COP26 is showing us that, it's only those that are willing to take action and try and make a difference that are actually going to help restore balance to a world that is in trouble, in terms of depleted biodiversity, some of the increasing climate challenges that are now landing on people's doorsteps, and perhaps the greatest thing of all, the social inequality. You have to remember that the people affected most are often those in developing countries that aren't as wealthy as the top third of the economic power and wealth that exists within the world. So I think there's that. I think as a force for good, the recognition that I was always puzzled by the term work-life balance, because when you find work you love to do, it's not work. This isn't work, but it is. So I think there's a need for greater humanity. I think the idea of leaders as being heroes, I think that time is now starting to disappear. I think the idea of white man's power over other things and other people. I think that's dissipating slowly and needs to accelerate. Everyone on the planet deserves a good quality of life. Everybody and everybody and everything. We need to reconnect certain things that have become disconnected. So the idea that we are separate from nature, we're not. We're an animal species that is part of nature, and therefore we need to be more respectful of that as and go back to some of the indigenous practices that serve those and ways of thinking. And I'm not holding that up as the panacea for all our ills, because that's not the case. But it is to look at what can we learn, and things like the Pachamama Alliance are doing that extremely well. Trying to bring those practices in, so reconnecting us back into nature, reconnecting the masculine and the feminine energy. That not, and I'm not talking gender there. I'm talking more of diversity, inclusion, and equity, where there is a feminine energy when brought to the table that creates better balance. The data shows that when that energy exists at the top of the company, where there's decision making being taken, that those organizations perform better than when it's solely a masculine energy. So there's a need to do that. There's also a need to reconnect mind and body. We've followed a reductionist approach that says if we examine things smaller and smaller and smaller, we'll eventually get an understanding of that. And yet we're whole beings, whole bodies. So we need to go back to understanding how mind and body work. So there's a number of reconnections that need to take place, and I think the business that follows that kind of thinking is trying to do the great thing. The other thing is, it's this idea of looking at not just the next generations of our grandchildren, but looking beyond that and saying, well, what kind of world are we leaving, and how do we go back and instead of going into space, investing that money here on Earth, to say, well, how do we restore balance? How do we undo some of the damage that's been done, so that when those unborn generations come into being, they have a world that will support them and their families. And it's kind of it's a bit of an ethereal concept, but I do think it's important, and I think our way of thinking needs to change about that. It's not about me, and some of it's about me. Don't get me wrong. It would be silly not to say that. It's like, yeah, I like my iPhone and I like my gadgets and all that sort of thing. But it's being mindful of that. If you go to, I went to a greengrocers the other day, a chain, used to be a farm shop, and we sat in front of the vegetable rack, and we wanted some tomatoes. And the choice was British tomatoes wrapped in plastic or Dutch tomatoes loose.
Oh.
And how do I make a decision? which is the more sustainable?
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
And you're thinking about that, and you're thinking, okay, that's where we are now. How do we make that better? How do we do that in a way that's more sustainable? And how do we add that up and take account of that? And what you learn is it actually is a very complicated topic. It's a very long answer to a short question, but I'm trying to give your listeners a flavor of what I mean by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're into short-term profits and chasing the numbers and driving people hard, getting them to expend effort. You're not paying them properly, all those kinds of things. Then I'd question whether you're being a better ancestor to a future generation.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very wide-ranging and holistic view, I think, of this topic, which, yeah, as you say, is very complex and interlinked. But thank you. That was a good summary, I feel, touching on lots of different points. So how does business as a force for good relate directly to what you do through your own business and your own work?
So
how are you sort of playing your part, would you say?
So I think it starts with the quality of the relationship and conversation we have with ourselves. And sometimes the quality of the relationship and the conversation we have with ourselves is not good. We talk ourselves down. We think we're worth less than we are. We believe our conditioning, from school, from our parents, from the media, and it's like wearing a pair of dark sunglasses. It's kind of like you view the world through a certain set of lenses, and what we need to do is we need to learn how to take the glasses off to see the world in a different way. And that journey is not easy, because it's not like flicking a switch that says, well, just change. And it's kind of like, well, if it was that easy, we'd all do it. There's a very well-known case study of at-risk heart patients in the States that were told, you need to change your lifestyle, otherwise you'd die. And of the sample that were told that, only 1 in 7 actually made the change.
Wow.
So if you're facing death and you can't change, I'm always curious as to, okay, what's causing you to choose not to change? And that's all to do with how we talk to ourselves and the kind of conversation we have that leads to our thought patterns and our behaviors. So how do you change that? And then how do you, because if you have a poor quality of relationship with yourself and how you talk to yourself, then when you put that in the mix of a team, then how you play with that team skews how that team performs. You know yourself. If you've got someone who's not on top of their game, or who's feeling off, or is a bit snippy and snipey, that influences how that team comes together, interacts together, and then works towards achieving a common outcome. So my work's all about the inner development process. It's taken me a while to figure out. I'm lucky I've had all this experience. How do I make that work in a business? But more importantly, how do I make it work in a business that I love to do? And there's nothing more rewarding. I tell you a story. There was a period in 2012. I was made redundant, and I thought, right, I'm going to be a professional musician.
Oh, wow.
I've always wanted to do it. I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be the 5th member of Led Zeppelin, but strangely enough, never got the call, and never will, and that's fine. But I taught young kids in the village, just for to keep the wolf from the door, how to play piano. And there was one young girl, and she was the daughter of a very successful lawyer, very sort of driving, successful. And you could tell she was just a bit stressed. And when we started, it was like, yes, I'll teach you piano, and we'll learn scales and we'll learn pieces. And there was one particular piece she was learning, and every time she'd come in, she'd always be struggling with it. And there was one week she came in and she said, I think I can play this. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. I tell you what, you sit at the piano, settle yourself down. I'm going to turn my chair the other way, and I'm just going to listen. I'm not going to watch. And she played it perfectly from end to end. And I looked at her and she looked at me, and with tears in her eyes, she said, I can really play that.
Brilliant.
That's what I'm about.
Yeah.
Everyone can do more than they think they can do. Everyone can do more than they've been told they can do. They just need some encouragement and support to help them do that, whatever that is. Whether that's working in an individual space or whether that's working in a team space. And I think that's really what my work's about, is how do I help teams play together by looking at what are the conversations you're not having, what's the quality of the conversation you are having, and what's causing you to do that. How do we lower the waterline and make it safe for you to discuss the undiscussables? How do you make it safe for people to say, well, the issue we brought actually isn't the issue. The issue is this. And I had a team a couple of weeks ago. They said, oh, the issue's this, and it was part of the issue. But when we got down to it, it wasn't the issue at all. No. The issue was, we need the courage to come together as a team, to have each other back, to go and talk to the board about the need to fix some of the things that sit within the business that need to be fixed, that when we fix them, we can then move on. But because we're scared of the board, well, not scared of the board, but because we're worried about the consequences of having that conversation, then that's the issue. So it was just a joy. So to see people walk across that bridge to vulnerability is firstly a privilege. It is a privilege to witness, because it does take courage and vulnerability and all those words that make people go, ooh, that's icky, I don't like that. But it's not what you think it is. It's not like we all sit in a group therapy situation. It's kind of like, well, we do various things that get us to that. We don't take the scalpel and chop the disease bit off. We try and heal collectively. So it's a kind of a waffly answer, but that's what I love. I love to work and help people do things that they think they can't do.
Yeah.
Whether that's individuals or teams.
Yeah, and sort of unlocking their potential.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Liberating them, really. It's very liberating to take that weight of I can't off, to go, actually I can. And actually it's a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously in my introduction, I talked a little bit about your career to date and all the different trainings and experiences that you had along the way. Well, probably not all of them, I'm sure I wasn't completely comprehensive there, but I gave people a flavour of the journey that you've been on to this point. I wanted to invite you to share a bit more about anything that I missed out, and also to talk about the learnings, I guess, that you've had along the way, and the changes that you've been on. And how you feel it's sort of all woven together to get you to this point now. Because obviously you've done a number of different things, haven't you?
How long have you got?
How do you make sense of everything that you've done?
Well, by looking backwards, as Steve Jobs would say. I think, and I know it's the J word, but that we're all on this journey of life, and I'm mid-50s, so when I grew up there was a certain expectation still of you go to school, you get good grades, you go to a good university, you get a degree, you go from a degree, you get a good career, you get married, you have a house, 2 kids, and then you save up for a pension, and then eventually you can have a life that you want. And clearly that is so old-fashioned and so irrelevant now. It's not the case. I think the honest answer is I'm a product of trying to get acceptance and approval from people I needed that approval from. So what I learned was all the certifications were either a ticket to get through a door. It's like, I've got my ticket, can I come through the door now? But even that's, do you approve? Or have I made you proud yet? And that was interesting, and it's taken me a long time to sort of realize that. So you could look at it and say, well, it's just one big compensation.
I was going to say, I think you're probably the most qualified person I've ever spoken to. I was very impressed. You've got so many
don't be
listed.
impressed. What it means. It means 2 things. It means I love to learn, and what I like learning is it is now multidisciplinary. And I think I wanted to have some credibility in the climate space and that. So I really wanted to understand that. So that was important as part of my work going forward, so that I can do that and I can talk to business, and I've got the resources to be able to say, well, if you'd like me to do a presentation on how things are looking in your particular industry from a sustainability perspective, here's what we can talk about. That was important. I got my MBA because I failed my A levels, and I went to a school that expected you that groomed you for Oxbridge, basically.
Right.
So I wasn't even going to Oxbridge. I wasn't even going to Red Brick. It was I remember my careers last, bless him. He said, well, your grades aren't good enough to go to university. You'll need to go to one of those polytechnic thingies, because I don't know anything about them. Go to the careers office in town. So you can imagine how I felt, sort of like a tail between the legs going, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And they were very helpful. They said, well, you should go and do something in business, because that will always stand you in good stead. And I thought, well, that sounds sensible. I did summer work in my dad's business doing stuff that kids do, you know, make up catalogs, tidy this, stock checks, which was all great experience. But when I went to college, I suddenly discovered I could get A grades. You know, I was usually the one in the bottom 5 of the class consistently. And therefore, I guess like a puppy that gets a treat and likes that and go, oh, can I have some more of that? I became conditioned to getting good grades because it just felt good because I hadn't had it for about 15 years. But I scored really highly, and all of a sudden I discovered that I enjoyed learning, really enjoyed it. And I guess that's where that took me. So I got the degree basically to say to school, see, you were wrong. Then I got the master's degree to get through the door of consulting, and also to remind the school that they were wrong. And I mean, I'm painting it black and white. It's much more complicated than that. The master's degree was a wonderful experience, and the things you learn are not the things you go to learn. So it's not about the technical content necessarily. It was about the relationships you build. It's about the ability to have a global perspective really quickly, the ability to digest and triangulate a number of different data points and go, okay, well, here in this context, if I use this, I can say with some certainty, this is what's going on, and therefore I can understand it, which actually in the consulting career was extremely helpful. You know, the ability to digest information, turn that around, turn it into insight, and then present it back to a client in the form of some kind of action plan that took them from where they were to where they needed to be, or at least towards where they needed to be, was really what they were paying us to do, in demanding timescales and, you know, going all over the world, and you know, which sounds extremely glamorous until you've done it for 2 years and you kind of go, I'm knackered. But again, all wonderful experiences, because some of what you learn is actually, that's not me. And in the midst of the consulting thing, I sat on the end of a bed looking at a hotel wall. It was the Hilton Hotel on Edgware Road in London. I remember it distinctly. Looking at the wall going, is this all the rest of my life is? Why am I so miserable? Because to all intents and purposes, I shouldn't be. You know, big salary, turn left on every plane, striding the planet like a giant, and you know, welcomed by clients, well, most clients everywhere, to go and do work. So and all the trappings and success that went with that. So that took me into the world of. I got the London Evening Standard, and it's a little advert in the corner that said, "Get the life you deserve." 2-hour free seminar in London. I thought, that sounds like me. I'm miserable. I don't know why. I need to find out. And I went, and I found out 2 important lessons. I learned there's no such thing as a free seminar. That's the first thing. And
very true.
Which is very true. And I also learned about neurolinguistic programming, and that had me hooked. And that started me on the journey of getting into practical psychology, going down the psychotherapy route, eventually ending up in coaching, with this enormous tool bag of stuff that allows me to do what I do today.
Yeah, fantastic. So what's next?
What's next? You know, it's funny. I think when you hit your 50s, your perspective of life does change. And I've done this. I've done I sit in a couple of mastermind groups, and we do this. You know, what's your vision? What's this, that, and the other? And my vision's changed from things I want to do and experience to things I want to become. And I've actually surprised myself by that, because it's very it's simplified into 5 things that really now become a guiding light to, if it's not those 5 things, then why are you doing it? And that's been really helpful. So, you know, I always remember a couple of funerals I went to. One was my ex-wife's father, and I gave the eulogy, and I was always struck by afterwards how people would come up to me and say, he's such a gentleman. He was such a gentleman. And I can't believe what a compliment that is. People will speak of my grandfather and say, oh, he was a real gentleman. And so that's my aspiration now, is how do I become a gentleman that is remembered as a gentleman in the literal sense of that word. You know, to have courage and kindness and apply that it is to all people I meet. And I'm not saying there's not days when I want to rip people's heads off. You know, I get out of bed like a bear with a sore head sometimes, and I'm just in the wrong frame of mind. I just know how to deal with it now. I just go, oh, that's where you are. Go and do this, and you'll feel better. So really, that's what I'm trying to do through my work in serving other people, in helping them become, either individually or as a collective, better than they were when I met them. Or, you know, if I take a role, you know, do I leave that role having achieved something and it's better because of that? Which isn't always easy, but that's in the front of my mind. The second is my wife, who I will tell anyone is not only my hero, but is also the making of me. I'm very blessed to have met her and convinced her to marry me. She caught me when I was falling, and we make just an amazing couple and team in terms of what we bring to each other, bring to other people, bring to our family, and what we do. So, you know, that's very much a focus of where I want to work. And it sounds, I mean, you know, there's probably some people going, oh, that sounds cheesy and horrible and this, that, and the other. But I hope, you know, my hope is that other people have the opportunity to experience that with their partner, with their life partner, because it's just that journey of continually growing, continually encouraging each other to do more than, you know, to be more in whatever way. And sometimes that means doing less. It's like, why are you doing that? Don't do that. You know,
Yeah.
Why are you over here? You're all about this. What's going on? You know, it's all those kinds of conversations and that. So that's important. Making the business a success, obviously, that provides the oxygen that allows me to do the other stuff, and the oxygen being the cash. So, you know, I'm not frightened of talking about cash. It's really important. We all need it. You know, I'd love to live in a world where we didn't need cash. I think it'd be a lot simpler. But if you think unplugging Brexit's hard, you know, unplugging money from the world would just be way too hard. So it's a fact of life. So I want to create enough oxygen by serving other people so that I can pay my bills, have the quality of life that I want, which is relatively simple, and do some of the things that I want to do in terms of giving back. You know, so if my bills are all paid in 6 months, that means I've got 6 months to go and invest in doing stuff for free.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my thinking. The next thing is really thinking about, so I took up martial arts about 4 years ago.
Oh, right.
And I did it because I watched my parents' physical health decline, because they came from a generation which was you retire and you rest, not you retire and you invest in your health.
Yeah.
And it was, I just made a decision that said, okay, I can't avoid the Grim Reaper. I'm going to go like everyone else. But when he comes knocking, I'm going to make sure I'm as fit as a butcher's dog to be able to do that. I need to find something I enjoy. And I've always hated running. You know, I admire anyone that can run any distance. But I always got involved in martial arts. And I thought I need to find something. So I took up Aikido. And now I'm working to become an instructor so that I can use that to work with young men overwhelmed by life. Because there isn't enough support out there for them to do that, to reach into, to do something that looks really, really cool and is basically a course in self-development described as disguised as a martial art, as most martial arts are.
Yeah.
Only this one isn't a striking art. It's one that's all about harmony and restoring and using energy. Something for another podcast. And then the last thing is, you know, music has always been a part of my life, and I was given a gift. I never understood why it never materialized, even when I tried to make it materialize. And I think now I'm in a place where I just want to write music for me, but I do want to put it out there professionally, even if my mum is the only one that buys it, and that's okay. So it's kind of a little bucket list thing that says, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to record something. I'm going to put it out. I'm going to do it as professionally as I can. and see what happens. And it'll be a fun process. So I want to learn to write for orchestra and all that kind of stuff. So I've got the courses. I'm working my way through them very, very slowly, and that'll happen. So that's what's next.
Fantastic. Wow, what an interesting mixture of pursuits you are following. A really interesting balance that
It's
you're
not always balanced.
creating for yourself. Yeah. So in our last few moments, I will invite you to share your contact details so people can follow up if they want to. But before we do that, I want to ask if you have any final words of wisdom, advice, top tips, or lessons learned to share with other people who are either embarking on the journey or are already on the journey of growing a business for good. What would you like to say to them?
So the thing I've been thinking about and reflecting on is all the business I've won since I started, I didn't chase. Everything I chased, I never won. So there's something in that would be the first thing. And I'm paying attention to that, because you can push and sort of shoehorn people into business. And I've seen that through my corporate career. But there's this interesting dynamic that's happening. And what I find is the people that come to me are the people that I want to work with, rather than chasing people that you go, I can't. All right, well, if we work together, that's great. I'll get some money. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is just be kind. You don't know who's going through what, particularly right now. Everybody's circumstance, that old classic of we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Yeah, absolutely not. I've had the privilege of doing pro bono work with frontline workers in acute units. And man, some of the stories and things they're having to deal with and continuing to have to deal with just makes you really humble. And if you think you've got problems in your life, just go down there and observe and listen and learn, because we have it easy by comparison. And that's not to say other people aren't struggling too. They are, and that's the point. Is you can't always see the struggle. So just be kind. And you never know what a difference a simple smile, a kind word can make to someone's day, and in some cases it can save a life.
Yeah, so true. Very powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So before we go, how can people get in touch or find out more about you and your work?
Best place is LinkedIn. So if you'd like to connect, please do. So it's just Paul Crick. There's thankfully not too many of us. You can also find me on Twitter, Paul H. Crick, if you'd like to do that. I share various bits of things that sort of tickle my interest. Those are the best places. There's a company page on LinkedIn as well, the Elevate Partnership. So that's the Elevate as in elevator and partnership. That tells you bits about, a bit more about what I do. And then the website is theelevatepartnership.com. That's where you can find me. And if you'd like to have a chat, I always say there's no sales pitch, because I don't sell anything that's, packaged. It starts with a conversation. That's all.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insights.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. Perspective.
I've really enjoyed hearing all about your journey and your business and how you're making that a force for good. And thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for listening in to today's Get Fruitful conversation. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, I invite you to give us a 5-star rating, leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, and tell your friends and colleagues to check it out too. This will help us reach a wider audience and make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, connect with other like-minded people in business, and continue conversations about topics discussed here, then I'd love you to come and find our community online. It's free to join us. Just search for the Get Fruitful Business for Good group over on Facebook, visit my website, getfruitfulmarketing.com, or click the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear what Business for Good means for you. Until next time, goodbye for now.